Oh my gosh. Fingers crossed. I think everything's working. Let's turn this up a little bit, make sure I still have audio once it kicks on. Sorry if there's an echo. I did it. I beat the game. Okay, holy smokes. My camera's a little wonky. I might need to end up switching cameras before this is over. But oh my gosh, we finally got there. I've got a few more things that I want to work out. But, you know, I finally got it to set up to multi-stream the way I want it to. Chat is working the way I want it to. You know, so all in all, I'm pretty happy. Unless chat just died on me. I don't know. It just threw me an alert. But, man, give me 1 second. I'm going to let everybody know what's happening. Holy smokes, man. That has been brutal. It's been an ongoing issue for a long time, and I had to basically just like completely wipe everything, reinstall, reset up everything. Sorry, I'm just typing, and I can't multitask. Like, fun fact, I am a horrible multitasker. And, you know, growing up, we were always told, why half-ass two things when you could whole-ass one? And those are words that I live by. It's definitely gotten a lot worse as I've gotten older. Let's mute you. But anyway. Perfect. Glad to hear it. Like I said, I'm just going to put this out there for everybody. I got to share my links. Gotta share the links. And I should have had this prepped, but I honestly did not expect it to work the first time. I was like, oh, this is not going to work the first time I do this. So I'm going to have to go back and I'm going to have to do it again. So I did not prep anything. And I apologize for that. But little did I know it was going to do it. Share now. Alright, so that is up there. In just a second. Got one more. Oh no, that's not the right button. Oh Lord. Oh Lord. That's the right button. Alright. So we got there. I can close you out. Perfect. So again, I apologize for the long setup. You know, it did take me a little bit. I've had issues with multi-streaming. I've been only streaming to YouTube the last few times. And that's not where I want to be. I don't necessarily make a ton of money on Twitch, but I do get a little bit extra money on Twitch. And while this is not something I do for money, getting the ad revenue does help me continue to create content because it allows me to invest that money into better cameras, you know, learning how to use specific software, things like that. It just kind of frees up some of my time, excuse me, so that I'm not having to invest all of my own personal resources into it at this point. You know, if I can make a few $100s from YouTube and a few $100s from Twitch, and I can just dump that back into my channel instead of constantly having to come out of my own pocket to do it. It makes it a lot easier, and it makes it much more worthwhile for me to continue to work on things. So, as the title, hopefully the title is proper. Let me, actually, I should have checked that, make sure it's showing the title. It is. I'm so happy. As the title suggests, we're going to go over not one, but two potential lists for my enforcers for Adepticon. I need to move this chat box or I am never going to see it though. So let's put you here. Let's put you over here because I don't need you. Alright. And the next goal is going to be putting the chat box on the screen so that everybody across platforms can see when they're sharing and chatting and stuff. But that's we're getting there, baby steps. The fact that the multi-chat and the multi-stream is working is a huge step forward. So I've got 2 potential lists I'm looking at, and there's probably actually like 3 or 4. One of my biggest issues when I go to big events or any kind of tournament is I'm always like, man, I could do this, but I could also do this, but I could also do this. And I know this is a pattern I fall into. I know exactly how this goes. Let me try moving my mic a little bit. There we go. I know exactly how this goes. I recognize it, and I know exactly what's going to happen. Is one of the first 2 lists that I came up with is the one that I'm going to stick to, and I'm just going to play it. But I'm going to, my brain is just a shotgun blast, and I'm going to be like, oh, I could do this, and I could do this, and I could try this out, and I could try that out. Initially, my goal was to play Night Stalkers, and honestly, the only reason I didn't is because I purchased a box, and it was missing 10 Reapers. And those just came in. Yesterday, I think it was. And I'm not a great painter. I'm average at best. Painting is not what I'm in the hobby for. I am in the hobby to play, right? That is my first goal. So there was no way I was going to be able to commit to building and painting those 10 Reapers and a few other things that I still needed to build and paint. And still finish painting the Veerman army that my bunny is borrowing for the event. And all my enforcers are basically built and painted. There's a handful that could use some touch-ups, and they're not amazing looking. It was a speed paint job so that I could go participate in the Michigan GT for that tournament. So that being said, that's how I landed back on the enforcers. It's not that I do or don't love them or enjoy them. I just have found that Veerman and Night Stalkers really suit my playstyle a bit more. And I like that kind of more melee-centric play. And again, Master Side, I did see your comment. I did respond. I just didn't call you out by name. So thanks for letting me know again. Just so you are aware, I did see that, and I wanted to acknowledge you. That being said, there's some things about enforcers that I do enjoy. There's things about enforcers that I don't enjoy. And I don't enjoy the real strong... there's no real melee support. Not really too many of the orders can benefit you in melee. And I get that that's not what they're about. They have decent melee. They have decent shooting. They're kind of above average across the board. So I kind of get what they're about. And, most of my lists still have some form of melee interaction because I tend to be a kind of aggressive player. I want to get across the table. I want to come bash your butt. That's just how I play. So we're going to dig through the first list, and we're going to dig through the second list, and we're going to kind of talk about overall what my thought process was, and we're going to go through each choice individually, and we're going to talk about it a bit. And as always, if you have questions, drop them in the chat. I'm going to drop something in the chat again, just so I can make sure that is still going strong. Live chat. Yep, perfect. Okay. As always, just drop them in the chat. I do see it on the screen here. If I don't get to it right away, I will. I promise. Because that's why I do these, is so that we can all kind of communicate, brainstorm, collab. And if you're going to Adepticon, here it is. It's probably going to be one of these 2 lists. You know what I'm going to bring. And that's going to be... It is what it is. I don't mind. Don't get me wrong, I like to win. But at the end of the day, I'm more about having fun and making sure my opponent has fun. So this first list, as you can see, is called Defensible. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's predicated around a lot of defensible units so that I can continuously be interacting even when you're trying to interact with me. And the main thing that this is going to do is it's really going to kind of, hopefully, kind of freeze up or slow down some of those aggressive melee builds out there. Some of those plague builds, maybe even some Night Stalkers builds. I'm not overly worried per se about like an aggressive Veerman build. Hey, what's up, KP? Welcome to the chat. Welcome to the stream. So it's really designed to kind of freeze those aggressive melee builds a little bit. Is it gonna work? It's worked all right the few games I've played with it. I need to get more into it, and I really need to play against a more shooting faction, like an Asterians or a Forge Fathers that are shooting heavy, just so I can make sure it's going to perform well against those also. And that's actually like one of the things I'm doing today is I'm going to take probably this list and play it against an Asterians player, and I'll probably teach a Forge Fathers player how to play today. We just ordered his first box. So what we've got on deck is we do have a Peacekeeper captain. I've been told by people who think he's a little expensive. I could probably agree with that. Not by a lot. He's maybe 5-10 points expensive. It's one of those where I don't know. I bring it in almost every list. Shooting Asterians won last year. I could see that. They can be pretty spicy. And especially if you have not interacted with shields a ton. You know, if you've not played against shields on a regular basis, like if you don't play against Asterians on a regular basis, those shields can be very overwhelming. And it also, obviously, your matchups are going to be very important. If an Asterians player gets a couple good lucky matchups, especially late, where you're theoretically playing higher skilled players, that also helps. You know, like I said, I am playing against Asterians. We're going to see how this works into them today, because it's a lot of decent armor, and it's kind of a goofy list. It's 1,250 points. I'm at 1,245. I could make it 1,250. I just haven't kind of fine-tuned everything. But anyway, we've got the Peacekeeper captain. I have yet to play a game in which I don't take the Peacekeeper captain. Again, I've talked to a couple players who are like, man, that thing is a little too expensive. And, nice. Heck yeah. Good to know. I'll keep my eye out for that. But that Firestorm aura, to me, is 100% worth taking. At 110 points, maybe it's a little expensive, but Firestorm to me is just too good not to have on the table. It gives you Weight of Fire 1 and Vicious Shoot. Nice. Let me, are you doing the Leaper spam? I've got a buddy bringing Plague, and that's probably what he's bringing. And so, like, the Firestorm gives you Weight of Fire 1. It does, and it's a 12-inch aura. So anything can benefit from it. Even vehicles can benefit from it. And that is important, because I rely a lot on Striders. Whether or not they're good, bad, I don't care. They fit what I need them to do. As a standalone unit, it's okay. I could probably give it the Phase Claws, put myself at 250, give it the Phase Claws, and be done. Because, sure, it has controlled fire, but it's 3 shots from a Dominator. I'm not really going to care that much. I'm not missing out on a ton. He's just by himself to bubble an aura. I can surround him with other things. Now, I do have 2 units of Enforcer Operatives. These are just base shooting Enforcers. And it's 5 Enforcers. One of them has a Burst Laser. Both squads. And again, this is one of those where I've had some interesting discussions with people. And I'm not saying I'm right. You know, I'm not going to sit here and be like, this is the way you should play them. Because I know people that have had better success with 6 model squads. I've had people tell me, oh, you can bring like 8s and they're real good. And that's fine. What I have had the most success with, and part of this is probably coming directly from Warhammer to Firefight, is just taking 5 model squads so that I can kind of try to maximize my ability to activate. Because one thing I've seen with Enforcers is that if you aren't careful and you hit a real, like, hordy kind of Veerman or Plague list where it's just a bunch of units and they just kill you on the action economy, it's real easy to get overwhelmed. So in order to kind of mitigate some of that, I've just taken to 5 model units for my base troops. Whether or not it's right doesn't matter. It's what's worked for me. And then the burst lasers are there because pin tokens are important. That is one thing, again, with enforcers that I've seen is that you don't throw out a ton of pinning dice, so you want to kind of get them where you can. And yeah, I could take a missile launcher and it's cool, and I could throw a single shot at, like a Strider or a corruption or one of those types of things. But unless it's a vehicle, I could also just throw a pin die on it, right? Or a pin marker on it. And it might not stop it from charging, but I can potentially, if it's not unflinching, I can probably stop it from charging. And if it is unflinching, I can at least give it that -1 to hit to kind of slow down some of its efficiency. And then we've got 2 units of Enforcer Defenders. I know when I did my deep dive in Enforcers, so those were my first deep dives that I had ever done. And I was really kind of going off of very limited experience with the game. I would still argue that the Defenders are just a little bit too much. The 12-inch range isn't great, but the knockback is nice, and the armor is nice. They're armor 7 and defensible. And it's one of those where they, to me, are a very matchup-specific unit, right? They don't have trademark weapons, so they can't use a lot of the orders, so they don't have the versatility of the regular Enforcer operatives. But what they do have is they have armor 7 with 2 hit points, and then they're defensible. So it's going to be very tough for my opponent, if they're melee-centric, to just come like, hammer me, hammer me, hammer me. Because if you're charging me and I've got 5 defenders in there, I get 3 dice each. That's 15 dice on a controlled fire. And defensible means I get both my actions and still get the controlled fire. Defensible means I can still control fire when I'm pinned because I get that Overwatch token. I just get another, I think it's -1 to hit penalty. So it's one of those where they have some play. I just don't see them being the versatile Swiss Army knife take. They're kind of I don't want to call them a scalpel because they're not really precise. They're more like a hammer, It's like, it's a specific tool for a specific job, but it's not really precise. And so they've done some work. And those are the ones that I'm like on the fence on if I play against an army like Asterians or maybe even like a GCPS where they're just like, bro, I'm just going to throw a bucket of dice at you anyway. You could be armor 1,000,000. I'm going to throw enough dice that something's going to get through. I do have 2 command drones in this specific list. I don't know that those are worth the 25 points to get 2 extra black dice for command point rolls. I don't know that they are not. I just kind of threw them in to see how it worked, and then I'll probably today when I play it, what are my options here? Stealth drone actually is probably a really good take. 2 hit points, armor 7, and stealthy, probably a pretty darn good take. I can give it an Accutech shotgun, which is also a really good take, because then the unit also has pinning. And then the mine layer drone is actually kind of neat. When you get assaulted, you do 3 automatic hits with AP1. So it's one of those, like, kind of neat. And it would stack with your controlled fire. So you could really put some damage out on a controlled fire effectively. But what I think I will probably try is either the shotgun or the stealth on the next one. And I don't mean to list Taylor, but I know going into Asterians, the Accutech's going to be worthless. So again, and it's not to list Taylor, it's more because if I look at it and I go, okay, if I hit this army, this drone loadout is completely trash. Okay? Are there other armies that it's going to be completely trash in? It's not going to be very useful into Asterians, and it's not going to be very useful into Forge Fathers because of effectively army-wide, what's that keyword? Help me out in the chat. You get to roll a nerve, get rid of your pin. Can't think of the rule. I'm sure somebody will let me know in the chat. But, so you got 2 armies that it's not going to be great into. but for the most part, it's going to work into most of the other armies. Stealth is one of those where it's like, again, you have maybe 1 or 2 armies where it's not going to be great into, but it's going to be really good into pretty much everything else. And those 1 or 2 armies, you're looking at, again, Plague, because they're not going to be bringing a ton of shooting, and arguably Night Stalkers, because, again, they're not going to be bringing a ton of shooting. So I just have to kind of decide which way to go, and I'll probably just kind of like roll the die when I do it. So we will see. Headstrong. Yep, that is it. Thank you. Oh, man. A little bit of a delay, I think. Yep. Yep. Oh, words are hard sometimes, guys. I'm telling you. Like, whew. But, yeah, so I don't know. I'll probably just kind of flip a coin when I go into my game today because I don't want to feel like I'm list tailoring into my opponent. And then when I teach the Forge Fathers player how to play, I'll just keep whatever I ended up flipping for. You know, if I get the shotgun, I'll take the shotgun. If I get the stealth drone, I'll just keep the stealth drone for both games that I play today. So we got 2 squads of defenders. And again, this is that defensible. Like that's what a lot of this list is kind of predicated around, is having a lot of defensible on the table. A lot of I'm always interacting, even if you're charging, even if you're doing your thing. Uh-oh. I don't like seeing a loading circle next to my cursor here. It's honestly terrifying. We can close you, actually, I think. Okay, perfect. And we do have 2 squads of defenders, and they're 3 models each. And both of them have burst lasers. And again, the burst lasers throwing out those pinning dice. There's going to be armies where they're not very good, but that's okay. Because the Dominator rifles against those armies are still going to be just fine. You know, you've got 3 dice at AP 1. They're not going to be amazing into Forge Fathers if they take all heavy armor, and that's okay. But at the same time, if I can get them within that Vicious aura, I have a chance of chipping extra damage without having to worry about the heavy armor. You know, so it's that, coupled with the fact that they're armor 8, they're resilient 1, they're defensible, so they're going to keep having counter charge or controlled fire. I get to pick. With these, most of the time, you're probably better off with controlled fire. Counter charge would probably be pretty good into maybe like a Strider, just because of the seismic on... Nope, they don't even have seismic. That's the regular Peacekeepers. Yeah, I think most of the time you're just going to want controlled fire. Yeah, it's going to be -1 to hit, but you're going to get an additional die, and it's still AP1. So, it is what it is. You know, there may be some situation where you decide you want it, but keep in mind your controlled fire, right? That's still going to benefit from your Captain Aura. So, it'll still be vicious. You'll still have way to fire. And this is why I said, you know, like, when I do my Enforcers list, I do bring melee stuff, but I try to keep it as versatile as possible. I do have 2 Striders here, and honestly, this is probably where once I figure out what drones to take, where some of my points would go, because I have the heavy burst laser on one of them, and I would really just like to take him as the tank buster. You know, so I'm going to have to shed, I think it's like 25 points to bring the tank buster. And then the Ajax Strider is defensible. It's okay. I need to play more games with it. I think, again, it strikes me as something that's very matchup specific. You know, there's just going to be armies and games where you're going to be like, wow, this thing is not the best. But then there's going to be armies and games where you're just like, this thing is awesome. But it is armor 8 with heavy armor. It is a vehicle. It is a walker, but it also has controlled fire. And then... I thought... Yeah, Andy's defensible. I was like, man, I thought Homie had defensible. So that was why I brought it. Was like, I wanted that defensible, right? So what we have here, though, is we have 1 command unit and then 2 black command dice from my other things. And that's arguably, like, the biggest issue here is that I have to reshuffle some stuff and probably figure out how to work in another commander. Especially if I'm going to drop my drones to bring maybe like the stealth drones. But that's one of those, like, I'll sit down and I'll kind of work that out later. You know, it's not the end of the world. It's just, I'll have to figure out exactly what I want and what I'm doing. You know, I could theoretically drop one of my operatives and then have all the points I need to just, like, fix the rest of the list the way I want it. But then I also lose 5 operative bodies, you know, so it's one of those, like, Enforcers at 1,250 points are real weird, and I don't know if every army is like that, because I don't feel like Veermen are. I feel when I play my Veermen at 1,250 points, I get to bring everything I want to bring. And Enforcers just kind of feel weird at 1,250. Like, there's a lot of sacrifices that need to be made. But like I said, overall, the concept of the list, be defensible, constantly be interacting, constantly slowing opponents down if they're going to be aggressive and charging. The weaknesses I see is there's not a ton of anti-tank, right? So any kind of heavy armor is going to be tough for me to crack. And that was very apparent when I played a game against a very leaper, it was a very high armor corruption, plague lord, aberration, pretty durable list. And early on, I tried to focus down on the bigger things. And it took me, I think, 2 turns. And after that second turn, I was just like, oh, I am going about this all wrong. And from there, I just started killing all the leapers. And I was just like, cool, man. Like, the corruptions, you're going to just, whatever you want to do with them. You want to go, like, kill a couple dudes, knock yourself out. Because what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kill all your scoring units. Because they're way easier to kill. And they have the higher unit strength. And I'm just going to make sure you don't have the table presence to score. And it ended up working. It was a real close game, but it did end up working. And so it was just like one of those where there's definitely some things about the list that need tweaked. But there's a good core or a good skeleton there. And seeing how it's going to interact against Asterians and Forge Fathers, even a new Forge Fathers player, I'll be able to help and kind of see how things should interact, and that'll help me out a lot, you know. So that's the first list, and if we do have time, I may talk about the Kings of War list, because at Adepticon, I'm going to play Thursday Firefight, Friday Dead Zone, Saturday, Sunday Kings of War. So if any of you are going to be at any of those events, I'm going to be there. I don't know what I'm doing with 2 of those games, so I'm just going to be like the free win where we just get to goof off and have fun, and that's all right with me. But yeah, so just keep that in mind. Like, I haven't even looked at Dead Zone lists. I don't know the first thing about it. I know how the game plays, and that's mostly because I've played Halo, right? I've played a lot of Halo, and I know some of the differences between Dead Zone and Halo, but I probably don't know them all. And I haven't even looked at a list, so I'm going to be just as surprised as everybody else when I get there. The second list, and I have a couple different variants on this list, and this is actually pretty similar to what I run on a regular basis. And so I have a few options here, right? I like the Enforcer Captain because it's got the aura. You've got, for the Council, you got 15 inches. You can remove a pin marker from 2, or all non-vehicle units within 15 remove a pin marker. That's awesome, right? It's not very often that pins hurt me. I'm usually, because of how I play the army, I'm usually okay with getting pinned. Like, all right, you pinned me. Ooh. But I have found that having 2 command units to get the extra command points has been very beneficial, because it just, like, 1 green die is not enough, right? So you need at least some sort of supplemental die, whether it's the orange die, whether it's the 2 black dice from the jet bike captains, whatever it is. Something needs to be there. Or jet bike lieutenant. So it's just him with a friend, you know, and it's just another friend with a laser rifle. And the main thing is, like, yes, it's two, or no, it's just him. He doesn't even have a friend, sorry. I do, again, Peacekeeper Captain. I could probably drop a Peacekeeper Captain, but I just don't see the point. Again, I just see them as that good. It's just, the aura is too good not to use. Right now, it's the Dominator Rifle Wrist Blade loadout, which is fine. I don't care. Yes, it has controlled fire, so the extra Dominator Rifle is nice, especially because this one does have a friend. So 2 Dominators makes that controlled fire a bit better. I was hoping to stream snipe your Dead Zone list. Well, I'll get one figured out, and but again, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just gonna be going into it blind and just hoping that the fact that I know how to play games is gonna help me, and that's it. But yeah, so we've got Captain with friend. And again, mostly there for the aura, but Peacekeepers are really good. Like, they are. They're just pretty darn good. And a lot of it's that Dominator Rifle. To me, that's, like, the best rifle that Enforcers have. Like, it's their best all-around weapon. There's not much it's not good into, because even heavy armor, yeah, it's only AP1, but you get 3 shots, so it's got a good volume. Alright. I do have 2 units of Enforcer Operatives. Big shock. They're 5 model squads with a burst laser. There's going to be some trends that you're going to see with me. And that's 5 model squads with a burst laser. And a lot of that is just because, again, I will take volume. The missile, again, it's cool, but it's also 20 points, if I remember right. And it's 1 shot. I'll take my 4 shots that pin. And then I'll just take dedicated units for anti-tank. That's kind of how I approach it. I'd rather have those guys just do volume, because I can always spend the order to give them anti-tank and AP1 against vehicles, and I can just be like, alright, well now I have 8 AP1 anti-tank dice, and if one of them damages, you're pinned. That's all I need in most situations, Alright, Enforcer Operatives. Now, we do have 2 squads of Assault Enforcers. I love these things, and I've again, this is a unit I've had a lot of conversations on, because I've just had people tell me, man, like, they're real cool, and I've had people tell me, man, those things aren't worth their points. And again, it comes down to play style, right? And what your expectation is for them. They're a great charge deterrent, especially for, like, mid-tier melee units and worse. Armor 6, like a unit of like 12 crawler or creepers, right? Stalkers. A unit of 12 stalkers is going to throw 24 dice. Now, sure, they can hit on 4s and they get AP and all this stuff, but your 2 hit points and your armor 6, so there's actually a solid chance, if you can full strength attack them, that you might win that assault. So you, especially if it's not a big, like, if it's already been damaged, maybe you've shot it a little bit, because again, a lot of times you're not necessarily looking to wipe units, you're just looking to win assaults. And that counter charge does a real good job of just keeping people, like, real honest. And a real good example of that is, I played a Marauders player, had a unit of Skyscrapers, and he really wanted to charge me, but he knew charging those assault enforcers was just going to get them killed. Like, he had to wait for me to activate, and then when I did, I think it's called the Council Expects. It's the order where you can go into Overwatch and you stay pinned. When I did finally activate him, I slapped him with that, charged one of his units, did a good amount of damage, and just went consolidated, kind of back down to kind of block those Skyscrapers from hitting other things, and was able to just kind of lock them in place for a couple turns. And yeah, it was great, whereas, controlled fire may not have that same threat for certain units. 2 Skyscrapers, or whatever the unit size is, maybe 3, maybe they still respect your controlled fire, but a unit of Leapers, hey, cool, you're going to shoot me with like 10 laser rifles. I might lose a leaper. I might not. Like, it's 10 shots on 5s against armor 6. So it's just like, hey, it's not the best. But then when they're looking at 10 attacks on 4s at AP 1 for control or countercharge, like, that's where, to me, the Assault Enforcer shine. I'd like to take the Assault Enforcer Captain, but I don't know what I would drop. Like, I could drop the Peacekeeper Captain, but losing that aura means I'm basically going to have to start from ground zero with a whole different list, because most of the lists that I construct are predicated on benefiting from that aura. I do have, all wrist blades. I have energy gauntlets on the sergeants. I may swap them to phase claws. I don't know. Phase claws just kind of seem not great for a 5-point upgrade. And it's one of those, like, I understand why they're a 5-point upgrade. Like, this is actually a discussion I had with the rules committee. I understand the logic behind them being a 5-point upgrade, but I just don't agree with it. Not that they're wrong. I look at a trademark pistol that, yeah, I might not use orders on it, but the fact that I can throw 5 anti-tank AP1 dice out of that unit if I need to, real important. The fact that I can go with that unit if I need to, real good. So there's just a lot of flexibility. I can extend their range by 6 inches and give them marksman and I think AP1. So it's like there's a lot of flexibility that comes with having a trademark pistol in this army, and I just don't think dropping that pistol for a bonus attack and elite is worth 5 points. Maybe for 1 or 2 models, but again, it's just how I look at the game and how I process it. I'm just like, I'll just take the pistols, keep my flexibility, because it's not about whether or not I do it. It's about whether or not I can do it. And if my opponent's looking at those pistols and they're like, ooh, it is 5 shots that hits on 5s, but if one of those goes through into like my Bronco or whatever they're called, the little transport trucks, I'm now pinned, right? Or something to that effect. So it's like that level of flexibility to me is worth keeping rather than spending 5 points to specialize them into one specific thing. I got a squad of Enforcer drones, and again, this is just throwing pinning dice. They're anti-grav, they're construct, so they can't be pinned. They're elusive too, which is actually really cool. I think I have consistently forgotten that they are elusive almost every game I've played with them, to be fair. They do have evade, and evade is not one I forget about, but they are 3 dice that are pinning within 12 inches, and they're real cheap. It's 55 points. You get 4 hit points at armor 5 with a 6/12 movement. They do still hit on 4s though, so it's just like, man, these are really good for just a cheap unit that you can throw on the table, move around, get some extra activations. Honestly, I would consider taking another unit of them if I had 2 more. I may have to pick up another box of these. Now, I do have a unit of Enforcer jet bikes. It is running 3 bikes. One of them does have a missile launcher. And that's because, A, the missile launcher is only a 15-point upgrade for the bikes, whereas it's a 20-point for the infantry. And then, so you get 2 Dominator rifles, which, again, love them. They're elusive 1. They're scout, so they get a pre-game move of, their movement, so 12 inches. It's a normal move, or I think it's advanced. Every game has different terminology, and to me, just a normal move is what makes the most sense. So they're anti-grav, all that jazz. But the big thing here, this is one of my favorite targets for go. And, it's one of those, like, I know, and again, I've used it other ways as well. Moving, shooting, and then walking into combat rather than a full-on charge. I've definitely done that to soften up a target, gain ground, and take an objective from an opponent. Absolutely. But Enforcer jet bikes can be infuriating if you just pop them out from behind cover, throw your dice, and then jump them back behind cover and use them as kind of a guerrilla tactic hit and run kind of unit. And that was honestly, like, the last game I played against that Plague player, that was one of the mistakes I made early on in that game, is that I was way too aggressive with my bikes, and what I should have done was held them back and just popped them out, because having that extra missile launcher to threaten all the big things would have definitely gone a long way to keeping him a lot more honest. And that was not the defensible. That was this list. I have played him with the defensible list, like I said, and that one was an interesting game because I really slowed him down, because it was a lot of like, man, I don't want to charge here. Man, I don't want to charge here. So it was like a very good interaction for me in that respect. But yeah, the jet bikes are real great for that, just popping out. But then you're also spending 2 command points every turn on your jet bikes, so that's something to keep in mind. But that missile launcher is real good, 36-inch range. I have considered just taking a unit of missile launchers, but they're just so expensive. At 1,250 points, they're almost 20% of your army. And sure, they're scary, right? Like, it's base 4. You can spend 20 points to give the sergeant a missile launcher, so then they're 200 points. So it's 5 missiles, 36-inch range, Dev 2, AP 4. So they're very good, but they're just expensive. And when I can just get 2 Striders for almost the same price, it just makes more sense to me to get 2 Striders, and that's actually what's going to round this out. Like, yes, 2 Striders is 270, but that 270 gets me armor 7. It gets me heavy armor. It gets me marksman. It gets me, the Polaris cannon, which is shorter range, but it's more damage. And so it's one of those, like, it's just a trade-off, I could save 10 points each, get rid of marksman, and maybe I should save the 20 points, reallocate it elsewhere. But between marksman and then keeping them in the Peacekeeper aura, that means that most situations I'm going to hit on 4s, I'm going to get to reroll 1s, and then I'm going to get to reroll any 1 die from weight of fire with my 2 shots. So, I miss on a 1, a 2, and a 3. On average, I'm going to reroll 1.5 dice, So that's kind of why I do it that way. Just to keep them very efficient. And vicious for them is very useful because for whatever reason, AP4 usually fails for me. It's just like, why are we doing this? So, but yeah, so that's kind of the list. And you can see 10 units, and that's about where I try to sit at 1,250 points. It's somewhere between 9 and 10. I could probably go a bit more elite, run more Peacekeepers, and just have like 7 or 8 units. But that terrifies me. Like, legitimately, I look at lists like that, and I'm just like, I could not play that way. And I probably could. But it's real scary as a player to look at it and go, holy crap. Like, you just have twice as many units as me, and this is going to be a struggle. It allows me to kind of have some table presence. And again, because of how I play my Enforcers, it works, right? So, but yeah, that's it. Again, if you have questions, let me know. I will do a brief run through of my Kings of War list. I'm not going to get super crazy in depth with it. Just because, again, I don't really know what I'm doing. This isn't a net list. I didn't look it up. I just kind of looked at the units I liked, kind of had a thought process in it. I've had a pretty good teacher, thankfully. His name's Brandon. Pretty involved in the Kings of War community. And he's done a great job of helping me learn the game and kind of preparing me for the tournament so that I don't walk away like 0-5, But if I do, oh well, it is what it is. I am going to play Night Stalkers, and that's because the organizer is actually going to loan me his Night Stalkers army for me to play. So I'm going to run through it. If you know what it is, awesome. If you don't know what it is, awesome. I I kind of know how I play with it, and it has worked fairly okay so far. I've got what 4 regiments of scarecrows, and a lot of the reason all my stuff is in regiments is just because, again, when I first started looking at it, I was just like, I don't know what any of this does. Regiment seems okay. So it was a lot of just kind of like, this is what I'm doing because this is what it is. You know. We've got 4 regiments of scarecrows. They don't have any of the upgrade. I forget what their upgrade is. Scream Shard. Don't even remember what it does. But they do have Wild Charge. They're real strong at Defense 3. It's a joke. Definitely a joke. The main thing is that they're cheap and they're height 2. Right? Because you need to have line of sight to charge in Kings of War for the most part. And so they're height 2. And things like Butchers are height 3. Things like, is it Soul Flayers? Are these? No. Tormentors. There we go. Things like Tormentors are height 2, but they have, I think it's, is it Leaper? Yep. They're height 3 when drawing line of sight. So when they are looking, they're considered height 3. When things are looking at them, they're considered height 2. So a lot of the play is predicated on using the scarecrows as shielding units, and then trying to support them with the tormentors, because the tormentors also fly, so I can actually just charge over the scarecrows if I can get that range. So if you get within tormentor range, I can hop over the scarecrows because I can see you and I can charge into you. So that's where that is at. That's why it is the way it is. Butchers, honestly, they're there. That's it. They're just there. Like, I like the models. They're kind of cool, and I have some, but they are based for Firefight. And honestly, I was looking at them. It's like one of the few things that are defense 5 in the army, and that was a big part of it also. And then we've got some Soul Flayers. And again, this was after I had played a couple games with Night Stalkers, I started kind of evaluating my armies, right? Like my list. And I was like, all right, I had some Needle Fangs in it and something else, I forget what. And I was just like, okay, these 2 have to go. Not because they were bad, just because they didn't work with what I was trying to do. And so, like, the Soul Flayers gave me what my list was lacking, and that's something that hits pretty hard and has good speed, and it flies. And that was the other thing, is that it flies. So, again, it's that I can constantly threaten things. A couple Mind Screeches, and honestly, it's just because they shoot, and they shoot pretty darn well. Like, Lightning Bolt isn't amazing, but it is a 6-die Lightning Bolt, so it's pretty alright. And then, it's Mind Fog and Wind Blast, so, again, there's nothing crazy here. 1 Terror. And I forget who it was. Somebody was in the comments talking about how terrors were kind of poopy. And maybe they are. I have, like, no perspective, right? Like, I am almost completely brand new to this game. The last time I played it was in 1st edition. And I only played a handful of games of it. Because at the time it wasn't what I was looking for. I was looking for something a little more complicated. Not that this is a simple or easy game, but I had come from Warhammer Fantasy, and I was looking for something to kind of recreate Warhammer Fantasy, and this ain't it, It's a totally different type of game. So I hadn't played this in like 10 years, so I'm basically brand new. I like the Terror. I understand the feeling that it's a bit expensive and doesn't do much, but I also understand that, like, into certain things, because of Rampage, into certain things, he's terrifying. Like, people have to respect it if they have, like, an infantry, cavalry, heavy army. Because Rampage, infantry, heavy infantry, swarm, or cavalry, you get 8 additional attacks for him because he's Rampage 8. So it's one of those, that's kind of how I look at it, is it just gives me something that people have to respect, depending on their build. I have a Horror. And so, like, we always over-enunciate that word in my house. One of my kids, he doesn't have the best speech, and it's one of those where he spent from 3 to about 9 in the hospital doing chemo and stuff like that. So there's some speech issues there, man. Whoever told you terrors are bad weren't using it correctly. That's fair. I like them, and it may just be again like a playstyle thing, like an expectation thing, because that's one of the things I've learned even from my time playing Warhammer 40K. You know, I would try to find units that you don't see on the table a lot, and I would try to find a perspective. Oh well, thank you. Like I said, I appreciate it. It's not something I've ever researched. It was mostly just trial and error. I played like 3 or 4 games with a buddy on Universal Battles, and after getting my teeth kicked in every game, I would just kind of go back and tinker, go back and tinker, go back and tinker, and this is where we landed on. But yeah, so like, there's a few words that he kind of struggles with because of not getting, you know, as much time with, you know, school and things like that. And so like every time he says horror, it sounds like he's saying horror, and I'm like, what'd you say? You know, like we always tease him. So now it's just become a thing where we're all like horror. So that's why I say it that way. And then you know, we have Esenishra. I'm not going to pretend like I know how to pronounce that. I did have the regular, I think, Banshee, right, initially. And when he and I were talking, he was like, hey man, the named Banshee is actually cheaper, and while her spells work a little differently, she's just better. And I was like, oh, okay. So I took a look at it, and like, yes, she is better. And it's one of those where the first game I played, the only game I've played with her, I didn't even use her right the first couple turns because I was trying to kind of keep her back rather than torpedo her. Shakira, oh boy, you're. But anyway, you know, I was not torpedoing her towards his siege engines. He had a couple siege engines in the back, and I should have just like torpedoed her straight into them. But I didn't. I didn't get there till I turned 3. So those things got to do a little bit extra damage. But now I see why he was like, hey, this is just better. And I was like, yes, okay, you're correct. Like, I cannot argue with that. So, all in all, like I said, I think it's fine. It could be a terrible list, and I honestly wouldn't even care. It's cool that, you know, like, you're like, hey, this is a pretty good list. All right, cool. I'm glad that I at least understand the concepts of this game now. You know, so all in all, it's an interesting list. It's an interesting game. I'm looking forward to having quite a bit of fun with it. And, you know, I don't know that I'll invest into Night Stalkers when I do actually start picking up an army for this. Because initially what I was going to do was try to clear with the TO using third-party models and just running my Wood Elves. And then the TO was just like, nah, bro, like, you just borrow one of my armies. That's fine. And I was like, oh, cool. What do you have? And he told me, and I was like, well, let's do Night Stalkers, because I have Night Stalkers in Firefight, and while they won't work exactly the same, I have to think that the overall concepts will be similar. OP needs nerfed. Too good. Shakira, dude, you're not wrong. Shakira, OP needs nerfed. Too good. But yeah, conceptually they have to be kind of similar, and they are actually. You know, obviously there's some mechanical concepts that are very different from game to game, but conceptually the way they handle, you know, you're going to have units that can kind of cover a lot of ground with some decent speed. They can hit fairly hard, but they're not going to take hits very well, you know, and they're going to have some kind of weird tankiness. Like, some of them have very good nerve but very low defense. You've got regen. So conceptually there's a lot of parallels, even though the mechanics are very different. But that's it. You know, that's what I'm looking at taking. We've got, before we wrap it up, I want to go over some things that we've got going on. And I know I kind of give announcements at the beginning of every video, but we are going to be doing the Wasteland Warfare Settlement campaign in late March, early April. I'll start doing videos on that. And that is going to be a rules breakdown kind of explainer video. I don't do a ton in the way of like battle reports. And when I do, they're always streams. And there's a reason for that. One, I hate editing videos. And battle reports require a lot of edit time. So if I stream it, I cut down on my edit time. And when I say I hate it, I mean like it's being chained to the desk and not interacting with anything, right? Like I'm just kind of like watching my own video, and it's brutal. That being said, I do stream games, but I'm not going to probably do that for Wasteland Warfare right now. It's going to be a lot of explainers, like breaking down their settlement rules, how those all work, stuff like that. I've got episode 2 for Night Stalkers should be out probably next week. And that's where we're going to take a look at the command units for Firefight Night Stalkers. And then I've got my follow-up how-to video for Firefight coming up. And that follow-up, if we can get a game Firefight at the... Absolutely, buddy. I mean, I'll be there Friday. Like, I don't know what you got going on, or Friday morning. But if you don't have anything going on and there's a free table and we don't play at the event itself, I'm more than happy to get a game in. But we've got... The how-to video is going to cover kind of like walking through a turn and then using orders. You know, the first video was a big, just like, how do I make a list? How do I put models on the table? Stuff like that. So episode 2 for the how-to is going to be, how does turn structure work? How do I give orders? And then from there, we'll talk about shooting, targeting, things like that. We'll start breaking down some of the other concepts in the game. So look forward to that. And, you know, there's going to be a few more streams like this in the future, just because, again, time. I did graduate college finally, so I don't have classes taking up all my time. Pat myself on the back. So that's cool. But that also means that the wife is trying to, like, reallocate some of that lost time for things that she wants me to do. So there's that. So... that being said, there was one other thing. What we're going to talk about? Fairly soon, in the next couple weeks here, I'm looking to potentially start doing a Firefight podcast with another person. They had reached out to me and said, hey, I would like to do this thing. Would you like to do it with me? And I was like, I would love to. You know, so we're going to start kind of scheduling that. I am going to really just kind of go with the flow on that. I know what the overall goals are for the podcast, but it's mostly going to be talking about, you know, playing the game, things like that. You know, things that I might not necessarily think to make a video on. I'd like to start looking at different mission structures. You know, I love Firefight. It is absolutely my favorite game that Mantic makes. But I want to figure out how we can kind of introduce some new missions to the game, or at least some new deployment zones to kind of shake it up. And again, it's something I have spoken to the rules committee about, and right now they are kind of also working on it. But the big fear is that if we start shaking it up too much, we start skewing the game to where it benefits like a specific army more than another. And again, my take on that is that that's okay as long as it's spread out, right? So, like, if one deployment zone favors melee armies and one deployment zone favors shooting armies, and then one deployment zone is fairly neutral, if events run 1-1-1, that's okay to me, right? Like, that's all right because it's not balanced, but it's balanced, right? Like, sure, round 1 you might have gotten the poopy shooting deployment zone, like a longboard, right? And you're just like, oh man, I can't play against something with longboard. But at the same time, round 3, you might get the melee-centric deployment zone, and you might just dominate. You know, so it's one of those, like, I'm going to be playing around with it with my play group a bit more. Like, one of the users in the chat, OP Needs Nerf, is in our local play group, so I think he and I are probably going to be brainstorming some different deployment zones and missions just to kind of change things up. And I'll be kind of talking about that as we kind of progress as well. But by and large, I'm really happy with Firefight, where Mantic has taken it, and with the mission pack. Let's see. Do you have any plans to cover Dead Zone, and have you heard about the supposed update coming to Firefight and Dead Zone around June? I am going to probably branch out into Dead Zone as I kind of continue on. It's one of those where I got Firefight, I love the game, and now I'm just starting to kind of dip into everything else. I dipped into Kings of War. I'll be honest, I'm fairly neutral on Kings of War. Like, I have fun when I play it, but I don't enjoy the structure of the game as much as I do Firefight. I like the alternating activations of Firefight compared to the I go, you go of Kings of War. So, again, like, I'll play Kings of War. I like Kings of War. But that's why I'm just like, yes, Firefight for me, please. Dead Zone, I have enjoyed it and Halo both when I've played it. So, yeah, I'm going to be covering Dead Zone because I'm going to have to learn it. I got to know what I'm doing before I head to Adepticon. So we'll probably do some sort of rules breakdown or something on Dead Zone coming up here also. And maybe talking and doing some strategy videos. And then probably also Halo once more stuff comes out for Halo. We'll see. Halo's kind of the hotness. And I'm... not to say, like, I want to go against the grain. But it's just one of those, like, if there's a million people talking about Halo, like, yeah, I can kind of pull some of that traffic by talking about Halo. But I'd much rather just, like, create my own niche, right? And just kind of go my own path. And that's kind of always been what I do. And it's arguably why I'm only sitting at, like, 1,200, 1,300 subscribers after a couple years of doing this. But actually, the last 6 months, I've seen substantial growth. So it's one of those, like, it's real cool. The Firefight community has been very awesome to me. They've been very welcoming and very helpful in, you know, just, like, building my channel. And I want to thank all of them for that. And, yeah, so... but, yeah, to answer your question, yeah, I'm going to be doing that. And then as far as the update goes, yeah, I've heard some things. I am not going to be discussing the things that I have heard, but I have heard some things, and that there are some changes coming, and that's about as much as I'm going to say on it. So, just know that there are things coming. Yeah. All right, we can close out the list. And then... that's going to be it. We're going to wrap it up. Hopefully everybody had a good time. I appreciate everybody for sitting and hanging out with me while we did this. I'm going to have at least one more stream with my buddy Bailey, who's going to be doing Firefight with me. And then we're going to do an after-action review after the Adepticon event. We'll stream that as well. So, again, thank you all. I hope you all have a great day. I have to go pack and get ready for my day of games.